Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so let's dive right into a topic that has literally captivated human imagination for centuries. Think about it. When you hear the word exorcist, what immediately pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably screaming, dramatic battles, maybe some dark, stormy nights. But today, we're stripping away all those Hollywood special effects. We're going to look at the fascinating reality of real-world exorcism, exactly as it's outlined in our source material. We're exploring what true spiritual defense actually looks like, and I promise you it is way more profound and honestly, deeply personal than anything you've ever seen in a movie theater. So let's just start by asking the big question right out of the gate. Is Hollywood exorcism the actual truth? Like, are entities really out there making people's heads spin 360 degrees or causing them to walk upside down on the ceiling like some kind of crab? Well, according to the text we're analyzing today, the short answer is a hard no. Pop culture just mixes up zombie lore with ghost stories to create these extreme physical anomalies, mostly just to amplify your fear. And this brilliantly highlights the massive gap between fiction and reality. The Hollywood myth is so loud, it's this intense physical battle, people are throwing salt, splashing holy water everywhere. But the spiritual reality, according to our source, it's entirely an internal, disciplined practice. It's all about mental barriers. It's about your daily habits. Real spiritual defense doesn't happen in a single cinematic showdown. It happens quietly, every single day, through the cultivation of what the text calls a pure nature. To really understand this, we're looking specifically at Chapter 3 of our source text from February 2020. It's titled, The Conditions of a Real Exorcist and the Secret Spiritual Rites. Let's discover exactly how the source material defines a real exorcist. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The text warns us about this concept of the psychological gap. You see, negative entities, or demons, don't just launch random physical attacks on people out of nowhere. Instead, they act a lot more like opportunists, just looking for an open window. They specifically target psychological gaps in our minds. We're talking about the unhealed, unresolved, or heavily ego-driven parts of our psyche. If your mind is a fortress, these gaps are the cracks in the wall where negative energy can just quietly seep right in. So let's break down exactly what those cracks look like. The source outlines several very specific and honestly highly relatable human flaws and everyday habits that act as entry points for negative energies. We're talking about things like unhealed past emotional wounds, unhealthy romantic entanglements, an inflated desire for fame or intense pride, burning jealousy toward other people, or drowning in earthly desires like excessive alcohol consumption. Notice how ordinary these all sound? The text is basically telling us that our everyday emotional struggles are the true battleground. This builds directly to a really crucial quote from the text. It says, drowning in desires like alcohol cuts off communication with high-level spirits and invites evil spirits. The major takeaway here is that relying heavily on substances, or just completely giving in to our base desires, isn't just a physical health issue. The source views it as a major spiritual hazard. It acts like static on a radio, actively severing our connection to higher spiritual protection and leaving us totally vulnerable to lower negative influences. But out of all these vulnerabilities, the text highlights two areas as perhaps the absolute most dangerous: romantic and sexual missteps, along with unresolved past trauma. Why are these two so potent? Well, because they involve deep emotional attachments and massive swings in our ego and self-worth. When our hearts are broken, or when we're driven by pure lust or manipulation in our romantic lives, our emotional frequency drops drastically, and that creates a massive welcoming gap for negative forces to slip through. The source material actually uses a very striking metaphor to describe this. It warns that romantic entanglements, along with extreme ego and jealousy, act like a thorn left in your side. Or even more vividly, like a fishing hook caught right in your cheek. Even if you think you've moved on from a past toxic relationship or some past failure, if you haven't truly reflected on it and healed from it, that hook is still there. And negative spirits can easily grab onto that hook and just pull you right back into the darkness. So what it all comes down to is emotional regulation. When individuals fail to regulate their desires and emotions, especially regarding opposite-sex relationships, they inadvertently open a direct path for entities to exploit their psychological history. The text states that a true exorcist must practice the utmost self-control. It's not about totally denying human nature, right? It's more about not letting your base desires pilot the ship. Because the moment you lose control of your desires, you essentially lose your spiritual defense. Okay, but enough about the vulnerabilities. Let's pivot to the solution. If our human flaws are the core problem, what is the ultimate arsenal of a real exorcist? Well, according to the text, it's not some magical weapon. Actually, scratch that. It's the complete opposite of a magical weapon. It is everyday tolerance and compassion. And I find this incredibly inspiring because it puts all the power right back into our own hands. The ability to repel negativity doesn't come from a special ritual. It comes from how much kindness, patience, and understanding we can genuinely cultivate in our daily interactions. And that brings us to how the text defines true spiritual power. It defines it not as cinematic magic, but as literal light energy. This light energy is emitted from the hands, the heart, and through your words. But here's the catch. You absolutely cannot fake this. This energy is only generated by a consistent, daily practice of tolerance and compassion. A person who lives with a calm, well-regulated mind and a deeply compassionate heart naturally emits this powerful spiritual light. And it's a light that negative entities simply cannot stand to be around. Let's look at the step-by-step roadmap the text lays out for us. I want you to think of yourself as the hero of this internal journey. Step 1, you must continuously refine a pure nature daily, which basically means honest self-reflection. Step 2, actively cultivate deep tolerance and compassion for the people around you. And step 3, when a crisis or negative attack actually happens because you've done the daily work, you'll naturally emit light energy from your heart and your words to repel that darkness. You have to conquer your internal vulnerabilities first so you can defeat the external negativity second. Now, we're reaching the climax of this explainer. You might be wondering, what about all those physical items people use for protection? In so many cultures, throwing salt or creating little piles of salt at a doorway is a super common superstition to ward off evil. But the text draws a massive contrast right here. It completely elevates true spiritual defense way over these physical protective superstitions. In fact, the text directly addresses the practice of using physical salt, which is known in Japan as mori-jio. Now, while people might find some psychological comfort in it, the text argues that against truly strong negative spirits, physical salt is practically useless. The true power, the actual barrier that gets the job done, flows from a spiritually refined person. It's the light emitted from the palms of the hands and the heart of someone who is deeply connected to their faith and higher teachings. So let's summarize this core argument clearly. Physical illusions mean relying on physical salt or superstitious items. It's basically an external crutch. The ultimate defense, however, is a mental barrier built on strong, unwavering faith and moral purity. The source material is crystal clear on this. Physical items are fundamentally less important and far less effective than the impenetrable mental and spiritual barrier you build yourself through your own daily ethical and spiritual refinement. Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought for you to reflect on today based on our explainer of this text. Is your inner barrier built on a pure nature, or are you just relying on physical illusions? Are you doing the quiet, everyday work of healing your past, regulating your ego, and practicing true compassion? Because if we really take the lessons from this source material to heart, becoming a true exorcist of the negativity in your own life isn't about learning some magic spell. It's about having the courage to look inward and polish your own soul every single day. Thanks for exploring this fascinating text with me, and we'll catch you on the next one.